one of the things that I was wanting to do is sort of dive start a few sessions on loss, death and dying, um, grief, uh, impermanence, whatever it might be. And, when we think about loss or we think about death and dying, I think that from there's a couple things that sort of pop out in sort of instantaneously uh, from a mindfulness perspective, and that's why uh, it's good to cover it, because even if we never think about um, dying, or we never think about uh, ourselves dying or transitioning, or if we haven't had loss, there's some people that haven't experienced much loss. There's some people who have experienced a lot of loss. Is how mindfulness can assist in the moments that we are either grieving, that we've lost somebody, or that we've lost a sense of, even an expectation of something, or, if you wanted children, not able to have children, that could be a grieving process. That could be a loss, the loss of a pet or an animal, the loss of a way of life, the loss of a limb. Doesn't necessarily have to be the loss of a life, but just anything that is lost, and how mindfulness can help with that. And so the first thing that comes to mind is that window of tolerance, is the window of tolerance. And I do want you to, as a group, sort of keep that concept in the back of your mind, or just sort of ask yourself, right, what is my window of tolerance? We all have a different window of tolerance, and that is perfectly okay. We all have different things that we might feel like we can cope with, and maintain a balanced nervous system, that we don't lose our lid, or flip our lid, or just go totally numb. That there is this window of tolerance that we can, for instance, be able to cope with what is going on in our life, irregardless of the external or internal situation. That through the practice of mindfulness, through the practice of breath work, through the practice of even asking yourself, moment to moment, what is happening in this moment, that we are able to remain in the window of tolerance, or that we recognize that we've left the window of tolerance. That through this practice of the breath, through this practice of mindfulness, that slowly we're actually able to increase the dimensions, increase the window of tolerance, increase our ability to be with what is, regardless of what is, in essence, if that makes sense. So increasing, right? How many times have you not been able to be with what is? Just sort of think back, maybe the last day, the last week, the last month, the last year. Be like, oh, I really resisted that. Any sense of resistance, so the present moment, is essentially not being with what is. There's a resistance to the present moment. There's an inability to be with what is. And if we recognize that, sometimes that's actually the antidote to the resistance. And we notice, oh, wow, I'm resistant to that. And just by bringing awareness to that, sometimes that resistance can decrease. But simply asking yourself, you know, how many times in the last week, in the last day, and from this morning, have I not been able to be with what is? Right? And how mindfulness helps in that capacity to be with what is, with each moment, moment to moment, moment to moment. And the thing that comes up, for me at least, is really, meditating or being mindful of impermanence, and the judgment that we have when we recognize that we are impermanent. There's I feel like in this culture, and definitely in myself, there's sort of this underlying current of like, it's like you're going to stay young forever. And if you look at all the ads, right, and all the things, there's a lot of messages like, anti-aging. What does that mean? Right? That's anti-aging is actually counter reality. It's counter the natural process. Instead, it should be, aging with dignity, aging with beauty, aging with presence, whatever it might be, as opposed to, I practice anti-aging medicine. Well, we're trying to hold on to this impermanent state. It's like we're always going to, our bodies are always going to look like they were when we're 20 or 30. Well, we know that's not true. But how much money and time and energy and self-judgments do we place on the changes that occur naturally throughout our life in even the aging process, which we see as an impermanent process? And ultimately, we all die of something, right? I had a friend of mine who sent me a text and said, "Oh, this guy in Mexico, he died." And I go, "Oh my goodness!" Like, he was sort of a spiritual teacher in Mexico. And I go, "What did he die of?" Curious, and he asked some of the other people. He died of old age. Okay. and and he realized just in that answer, it was like did they even know, right? And so then I was like, well, maybe they don't even know. But then my next question was, did he know he was transitioning? Right? Was there this awareness of the knowledge that he was actually transitioning, or did he just go to bed one night and die in his sleep and that was it? Right? Because that does happen, people, right? Or was there a knowledge of this transition, that his life had actually was coming to a close, and he was actually, he was transitioning. And so I thought that was funny, right? He died of old age. But we live in this sort of anti-aging culture where we're really not okay with impermanence. We're really not okay with impermanence. And two things that come up. One is to fully recognize that that's the culture we live in, and that we underlying might actually have some of those judgments ourselves, right? That maybe I do want to be 35 forever, or feel like I'm 35 forever, or what that might be. And that might be okay in terms of being self-compassionate with myself and not judging myself for having that that conditioned mind. to recognize that that's simply a conditioning of the culture that I'm living in. Okay, so I recognize that there's a judgment, that there may be a judgment that, for instance, getting an illness or a disease or whatever it might be, that causes us to die, that we did something wrong, that we did something bad, right? Some of us have that dying is bad, that dying is actually something that shouldn't occur. If you just sort of, tap into yourself and ask yourself, are there any of those underlying currents in your belief system? I feel like when somebody dies, there's like a sorrow, right? In myself, like there is a loss. There's a loss of, let's say, that human body. There's a loss of that human spirit, let's say. There's a loss of maybe that human connection. That there is an attachment to the physical body. That I enjoy spending time with my kids and family and whatnot. And that I would probably miss that. Right? But I come from a very, sort of, let's say, spiritually scientific medical background. And I've studied a lot of embryology. In fact, my major at UCLA was molecular cell and developmental biology. So my total fascination, right, was how does an egg get fertilized by the sperm and become a human being? That was one of my biggest fascinations when I was in college. And that there is a constant process, we call it metamorphosis. There's the constant process of change, right? That we are one cell that becomes 2 cells, that becomes 4 cells, that becomes 16 cells, that becomes 32 cells, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And we are constantly undergoing this process of change, this process of development, that this is a very natural process. And in that process, there's a lot that when you study the molecular mechanism of, for instance, embryology, that the movement that needs to occur, for instance, in the egg to implant, well, first of all, for the sperm to meet the egg and the egg to actually welcome the sperm in, for the fertilized egg to implant into the womb, that there is a relationship between the womb, between the uterus and the egg, that the egg actually has to make contact with the uterus, and that the uterus has to be ready to accept the egg into the uterus, because then the uterus can envelop the egg and create the human being. And when you study this, and I kid you not, when you study this, even at the molecular level, you can't deny that there's some sort of divine intervention that is orchestrating this entire thing, that there's something that is orchestrating this. It is too beautiful for this to happen simply because molecules evolved in such a way. That even if molecules evolved in such a way that there was a divine intervention in the way that the molecules evolved. And even studying this from an embryological perspective, the sense that you get from this is that the power of love is actually involved in this process. All right. So this is from me, like, studying embryology and being like, look, there's something so beautiful about this. There's something about the relationship between the fluids and the cells, the relationship between the egg and the sperm, the relationship between the fertilized egg and the womb, and the womb that's welcoming the fertilized egg, the relationship between the tissues of the womb that start to enfold the egg like the warmest hug you could ever imagine. And yes, that's not technically you, but it is you. We've all gone through this process. I guarantee it. We've all gone through this process. You might not have been conscious of it. Some people might actually, when they go into some sort of hypnotic states, can actually go back to the point of the egg and the sperm meeting, but most of us are not conscious of that. But yet, there was a fertilized egg that became you, that was enveloped by the womb in such a loving hug that you can't deny that there was a profound love for you to be in this universe. It's so profound. It was like, hey, let's bring this into this tissue that is ripe for this egg at this time. And let's nurture this egg so that this egg can become a human being. All right. And you sit back, and even if you just watch the show, and all of a sudden the fluids become cells and the cells move and they migrate, and somebody's going, okay, now you go over there and you become the heart, and you fold in and become and you do a twist and become the brain, and you don't bring the cells there. You stay as a cavity and do this, right? And all this stuff. And you're just like, right? And there's somebody just waving a wand, and all these cells are moving, right, to all these different places as the uterus is holding everything that is happening inside, providing it nutrients, providing it oxygen, providing it all the growth factors that it needs, all the building blocks that it needs to build the embryo. And you're sitting back going, I'm being created. I'm being created. In physical form. In physical form. There's many metamorphoses. The analogies, there's many analogies, like a cocoon becoming, or a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, for instance. I was shocked to find out that, for instance, the caterpillar didn't just grow wings, that it actually had to dissolve itself. And then as it dissolved itself and became goo, the wings formed out of the goo that was forming itself. A tadpole becoming a frog, et cetera, et cetera. But my point here is not to talk about embryology, even though that's what it seems like, is that we've been constantly undergoing this impermanence. We've been constantly, our creation, in my opinion, from an embryological perspective, is so based in love that if that energy is present, for instance, in our creation as a transition into this world as a physical being, then that same energy has to be present in the transition out of this physical body. Okay. And this then, wow, impermanence. Huh. This is just a natural way of how things are. Can I trust it? Can I trust it? It didn't involve trust when we came in. Maybe it did prior. no trust involved, but it wasn't cognitive, let's say. It wasn't using your prefrontal cortex. Can we trust the process, right? If we look at this as sort of an energy pattern, the mechanisms of the way that the universe works, the great mystery, if it's the same cogwheels that are spinning, and we are created, in my opinion, from this energy of love, it present throughout our entire life. And that is then the same energy that's present as we transition out of our physical body through death. And so not only is there the impermanence of the physical body, that we actually notice ourselves changing, that we see our skin changing, our tone changing, maybe even our cognitive abilities are changing. And that we recognize the impermanence of everything that is physical. And that we trust it, that there's a trust in this process. And that in that trust, what happens? There's an acceptance. There's a lack of holding on or resistance. In that trust, then, can we be more okay with what is? I sit back on that embryological energetic form many times. From an energetic perspective, the potency of love that was present when the cells come together and they merge with the womb, and the womb accepts it. There's a relationship that's being formed. There's a reaching out by the egg, and there's an acceptance by the womb. Right? It's orchestrated in love. That same process, I don't know, this is a hypothesis, but that same process would be present. If it's present through the creation of our physical body, it's also present through the transition, through its transition. All right. In terms of tapping into the impermanence and our trust, today's meditation, I'm going to guide you a little bit back into embryology. Almost kind of a guided imagery of you back in the womb, and seeing if we can get to that divine love that was present as you were being developed, and see if you feel, you might already feel it, but see if you can unveil it or feel it more potently as we do this meditation. All right. Let's begin by closing our eyes or having a soft downward gaze, finding a comfortable position. I do recommend either sitting or lying down for this meditation. And if during this meditation you find yourself wanting to fall asleep, that's perfectly okay. And just taking 2 or 3 deep breaths. And with each in-breath, inviting in the present moment. And with each out-breath, releasing any stress or tension that may be present for you. And just allowing anything that you feel like you're holding on to either release, let go, or that you can put it to the side for the next 10, 15 minutes. And if you wish to pick it up after your meditation, you may. And at first, bringing your attention to your anchor. Your anchor is a place that you feel like you can direct your attention to that feels safe, like a resource. It can be your breath, sensation of your feet on the floor, or your back against whatever surface it may be on. It may be the repetition of a word or phrase, like a mantra. An emotion. And as your mind wanders, simply coming back to your anchor. As your mind wanders, simply coming back to your anchor. And from your anchor, using your anchor as a resource, directing your attention to your physical body. And the impermanence of your physical body in terms of how it has changed for you over the last few years, over your lifetime. And if you can imagine in your mind's eye, you as a little baby, imagining wherever you may be that you feel safe as a baby. Maybe it's in your mother's or father's arms, grandparents. Maybe it's lying next to a animal. If there's any place that you felt safe, and if you didn't feel safe, seeing if you can find a place in your mind's eye where you can imagine feeling safe. And imagining all the changes that occurred from that baby until you in the present moment right now. all the changes, all the impermanence, that every single day there was something changing, whether it was your limb that was growing, your brain that was growing, whatever it was. And how impermanence is just a natural part of our life. Now, from that baby, imagine going all the way back into your mother's womb. As an embryo, as a fetus in the womb, and irregardless if the pregnancy was a good pregnancy or a bad pregnancy, here you are right now. That as a fetus, you're sitting in the womb, being totally enveloped by fluids, by the womb of your mother, holding you with love. And even before you became a fetus, imagining if you can go back to the egg and the sperm as they come together, forming you. That there's a divine orchestration of relationship as the egg welcomed the sperm, allowed the sperm in, as the egg started wandering down the fallopian tube to find a place for it to mature. As you are traveling down the fallopian tube, you rest on the side of the uterus. And from the side of the uterus, the cells start talking to each other. There's a reaching out. The uterus sends out a projection to the egg, and the egg is welcomed into the uterus, providing all the nutrients, all the fluid, all the blood that is necessary for you to grow and be vibrant. You could imagine a warm hug of warm fluid coming around you and holding you and bringing you in. All in this ever-changing process of your development. You're entering into this physical body. See if you can rest in that energetic love, that energetic, warm hug that brought you here today. That there is this constant process of impermanence as we did not remain the egg or the fetus, that we were born into this world with this energy divinely orchestrated by love. And as we continue to grow and age and change, that we continue this journey of impermanence. With love. And if we can, we trust the process as best we can. That this is the way of life. It's totally natural. Everything is changing. Trusting the impermanence of it all. And as we bring this meditation to a close today, seeing if you can connect in with that love throughout your day. The love that brought the fertilized egg and the uterus together. The love that helped envelope you and bring the nutrients. The love that helped form all the different tissues of your body and know exactly where every cell was to go. The love that allowed you to be born into this world. And the same love that will help us transition out of this world. And so with that, bringing our attention back to our anchor, taking 2 or 3 deep breaths, opening your eyes if your eyes were closed, and just taking a moment to reflect on our practice today. I wish you all love and health. Have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.